Hello and welcome to episode 35 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark, and today's episode is going to be another music-related interview. You've probably noticed from the last few episodes I've been speaking to many people within the music industry. So to get to speak to Jamie Lemon from my favourite band Reuben, most recently Dave Laurie, who was the manager for Jeff Buckley, it's been a great time to speak to people within music, and that's not going to stop today. So on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Justin Schlosberg, the frontman from the British band Hell is for Heroes. Now, if anyone knows me personally, anyone has followed me on my own Twitter or Facebook, you will know just how excited I was when Hell is for Heroes announced a tour to celebrate 15 years of their debut album, The Neon Handshake. I remember buying that album the day it came out, 15 years ago. Man, it's showing my age. But I remember sitting there and it just blew me away. It was one of those albums at the time that came along with sort of Biffy Clyro, Million Dead, 100 Reasons, and these bands completely changed my listening of music. It just helped shape the taste of music that I would then grow into in my kind of teenage years. And Hell is for Heroes are one of my favourite bands of all time. The Neon Handshake doesn't have a bad track on it. It's one of those albums you can put on from start to finish and every track could be a single. It's that strong. I absolutely adore it. So to know I had the opportunity to sit down with Justin and get an interview was a dream come true. I've had a really busy couple of weeks recently. I've been to Download Festival where I was lucky enough to see Hell is for Heroes play. I thought they were absolutely phenomenal. I think they put on a great performance, and it was great to see how much hunger they still got after many years. I mean, they took some time out and they're back and they seem more up for it than they ever were even back in the day. But I don't want to ruin too much about that because we discussed that on the interview coming up. I've recently gone to see Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam, and it's just been a great time to see some awesome bands. And I love this time of year when loads of bands are playing festivals and releasing new material, and hopefully that will mean a lot of new interviews coming to Mark and Me. So without further ado, let's get to today's interview. So here I am with Justin Schlosberg from Hell is for Heroes. Enjoy. Okay, Justin, my first question for you today is, growing up, what was it that made you want to start a band? Had you been to a gig or bought a certain album that made you think, do you know what, I want to give the whole being in a band a go?
You know what, I wasn't particularly more into music than the next kid, really. I never really seen music as particularly my calling. I think it's more performance and entertainment. I come from a genetic. There's some genetic history of performance in my family. My late grandfather was a kind of impressionist entertainer in the 1930s. He sort of headlined the London Palladium, and so I've always kind of grown up around that kind of culture of performance and entertainment. And I suppose when I discovered rock music, you know, any kind of loud, aggressive music, it just seemed to speak to me on some kind of visceral level, and joining a band seemed like the most natural thing to do. But it was never, as I say, I don't really consider myself even a musician, really. I just do what I do, and I'm not particularly trained or necessarily even talented. I just it's just a platform for self-expression.
So what was your kind of record collection like when you were growing up in your teens? Did you have certain albums that you religiously listened to, or was it kind of a bit of everything?
Yeah, it was fairly eclectic. I mean, I started listening to good music, I suppose, like a lot of people from the early teens. I got into some of the kind of 80s new wave bands, The Cure, Depeche Mode, and I think, you know, when the first sort of proper rock album that I completely became obsessed with was probably Enema by Tool. But, you know, I also, you know, I was into sort of everything, so I kind of, I listened to The Clash, but I was also, you know, into Pink Floyd and, you know, a lot of classic rock. So, yeah, I mean, I know that's sort of sacrilegious in some circles, but I've always had a bit of an eclectic music taste, but also not a particularly broad one. I mean, I've never had kind of libraries of of CDs or records or anything like that. I just whatever's kind of the moment that I discover, I kind of latch onto for a while and then move on to the next.
So can you tell me literally how Hell is for Heroes formed? Was it a case of you were all friends, and with the other band members, or was it a case of you had an audition, or how did it all come about?
I was probably the odd one out, in the sense that the others were all went to school together, and so knew each other, from way back. And I was kind of introduced through a mutual friend when I think Will, the guitarist, and Joe were talking about forming the band, and they were looking for a singer or a front person, and we just met in a pub, really, and I think there was a sort of strange but fairly instant kind of chemistry. Then we went and got into a rehearsal room, and I suppose it was an audition of sorts, and that was that, really. I mean, it's always, even from when we first met, it's always felt like, we've always felt like a band of, a sort of a collection of misfits in some sense. We never looked like a band in the way that some of our contemporaries did, and we all bring, quite different influences and ideas to the table, and I think that's part of the charm, really. I think we've never really slotted in neatly to a particular scene or even a particular style of music, much to the woe of record companies and music biz people that were around us for a while. But I think that's probably the thing that I personally like most about our band.
The thing is as well, I think you came at this time, I think it's around sort of 2000, 2003, those sort of years, when there was this big, really good scene in Britain for good upcoming bands. You had people like 100 Reasons, you had yourselves, you had Reuben, you had Biffy Clyro, you had Million Dead. It seemed to be like the peak of decent hardcore and rock bands for the country. I remember even putting on, I think it was Top of the Pops, and 100 Reasons were on there, and I was like, were you guys, was it on The Word that you guys performed? What was that show called?
It was actually a Channel 4 show called Born Slippy.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, I guess there was a moment of sorts, and we liked all those bands and played with them and got on with them and had good times with them. But again, we never felt, really part of that scene or any scene. And actually, musically, those bands are quite different. And I think sometimes, I mean, I know what you mean. There was obviously, there was some kind of moment for British rock bands, and a lot of that I think is to do with the way that magazines like Kerrang kind of hyped it up a bit, and it was seen as the thing to sort of buy into for a while. But I don't know. I mean, I just think good music is good music, and it's always been around, and it always will be around. And sometimes, it may be a bit harder to find, or it's not on Top of the Pops, or whatever is today's equivalent, X Factor or whatever. But and other times it is, super popular. I just don't buy into this idea that somehow, good rock music comes and goes, or it dies and gets reborn, or it's just, to me, it's just always around, and just people, just swings maybe in and out of fashion a little bit.
It's just at times it's harder to find. You've got to go into those record stores and dig a bit deeper. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the scene in terms of bands that kind of play together and tour together, that definitely was a sense of that. But as I say, we've never really fitted in anyway, so it didn't mean a whole lot to us.
So you guys obviously started rehearsing, you wrote some songs, and you then kind of secured a record deal to put out your debut. The Neon Handshake is arguably one of the best debut albums of all time, and now I think it's because it's so honest, and it's the simplicity of the album. It is what it is. It's not trying to be something different. What was it like kind of exploding? Because it wasn't just a case of you released a few EPs, and then you did the first album, and like Biffy Clyro, you got to album 5, and then it all took off. You guys hit hard. You know, you were in every record store, you were playing big shows, you were playing festivals. That's quite a lot from most bands' first release. Not many people get that kind of exposure straight away.
Yeah, so I guess we were sort of lucky in a lot of ways, in that we had a record company that was prepared to sort of back us off the back of right off the back on our first album, which I think doesn't happen that much these days, particularly not to bands like of our ilk. But on the other hand, spending £500,000 on an album, of basically 3-chord loud rock songs is probably a bit of a waste of money. And I think, I'm sure that the people that kind of made those decisions at the time will think that looking back on it. It was great because it gave us an exposure and it gave us a kind of moment. But I think it also put us in the same kind of ball game as bands like, Coldplay and, whatever else that we were just never going to be as big as, that our kind of music just, seen or no seen is just not, we were never even aiming for that kind of success. We never expected it. And so I guess we were kind of, we were around a lot for a moment, but then, we were always quite careful not to get carried away by it. We never really kind of believed our own hype. It was just about making the record that we wanted to make. We didn't really care about having big name, producers or all the kind of glitz and the glamour that goes along with a lot of albums that are produced on that scale at that level. We just wanted to make, as you say, the songs that we wanted, to record and in the way that we wanted to record them. So I think that's probably the thing that has made it stand the test of time, or at least, the 15 years since we put it out, that people still relate to it, and we still relate to it. I think that a lot of bands, when they do get that kind of exposure and money thrown at them, that it's quite easy to sort of lose your way a bit and start, chasing something that is not really who you are. So I think that, looking back on it, that's probably something that we did quite well.
Awesome. So after you'd done your first album, you were touring, you were going off there, you were headlining shows, I saw you on the front of Kerrang and stuff. Was it quite pressured that you had this massive, huge record deal? Because for the second album, did you break away from the label and do it independent?
Yeah, so what happened was, inevitably, that kind of tension that I was talking about came to a head, in the sense that, we just wanted to make this honest rock record in the way that we wanted to make it, with the people that we wanted to make it, and, we weren't really playing the same game as, other bands in our position. And I think when it came to the second album, there was already, shit blowing up in big record companies at the time, and so you had this like constant turnover of staff and managers and whatever else, and there was a kind of new boss who sort of wandered in and said, well, I want to hear the kind of the hits, in a sort of slightly cliched way. I mean, that's probably actually a bit unfair. I think he was probably just struggling with, where to kind of fit us in, that problem of, well, we're not quite like the other sort of post-hardcore bands around at the time, and we're not quite like the sort of more poppy bands or poppy indie bands, and basically we were sort of writing songs for the album, and he was saying, go back and write some more, I'm not sure about those, and that just didn't really sit well with us at all. I think not because we were particularly, self-righteous about it. It was just like, we just knew that wasn't going to work for us. We knew that we couldn't be the kind of band that had an album produced effectively by people who worked in an office. We just knew that was never going to work for us either way. So we just thought, well, look, these are the songs that we want to do, and we understand if you don't want to do them, and then we're just going to go off and record them, which is what we did on our own. And it was actually quite liberating in a lot of ways. We didn't have a lot of the perks that we had with the first album of being in a major label and having all that kind of money to play with. But on the other hand, I think it unleashed a sort of creativity in us. Certainly by the third album, which we did more or less completely on our own, that might otherwise not have seen the light of day. So yeah, looking back at it, I think it was all good.
It's a weird one, isn't it, that you had this massive label and you had these songs that they called, more of the hits, more of the poppy ones that could get on radio, but your follow-up had songs like One of Us, and that for me is commercial as some of the stuff off the Neon Handshake, and it seems weird that they kind of wanted you to change from what you were doing anyway. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, again, I think that just, the music industry has always been, I think, quite a conservative institution, and ultimately what they want you to be like is other artists. They want you to be like other artists who are successful, and they want you to kind of sound like them and look like them, and then they sort of feel confident because they think that that's a good indicator of what is hot right now or whatever it is. And I understand that. Music is a tricky business by definition. So of course that's the game that they want to play. And I even understand that there are kind of bands and artists that play that game, and we just weren't able to. We didn't have we're not a quintessentially handsome, slick looking band that could really pull that off in any case. As I say, we look like a bunch of misfits. We are a bunch of misfits. We just wanted to play loud, filthy rock shows and move people in some way and express ourselves in some way that is unaffected by all of that bullshit. And that's what we did. And I think that's what's kind of that's ultimately the stuff that lasts. That's the thing that kind of sticks that sticks with people. I think if we started trying to be a band that we knew we wouldn't be, I think not only we wouldn't have achieved that success anyway, but I think the people that did support us with that first album would have quite rightly looked at it and thought, well, this is not real anymore. So I think that has happened to a lot of bands. So yeah, I just think I'm not saying we did everything in the right way or in the best way, or that there's nothing that I would change. But I think fundamentally, we did kind of stay true to ourselves in that sense.
And I think that's important. And like you just touched upon then, with your third album, which was your final album at that point, you did it all yourself, didn't you? Didn't Will produce it and engineer it and help kind of get involved in the actual recording process?
Yeah, pretty much. And he was getting into that. He's always been interested, by sound, and I think that in some ways it was our best sounding album because. I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think that Pelle and Eskil, who produced our first two albums, did an amazing job, and the records still sound, impressive to me. But I think that there's also something to be said about not having people, who are not in the band telling you sort of how sound. I mean, sometimes it works. Sometimes actually, I think that it helps to have kind of fresh ears, and people say, "Oh, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that?" But I think what was special to me about that third album is that it was just totally, from us, and that's probably the record that I listen to or have listened back on the most. But yeah, I mean, other people in the band might feel differently, but I think that record really captured something about us that probably possibly wasn't fully captured on the other albums.
So where did it kind of all go wrong at this point? Because you released your album on your own label, you put it out there, you'd had all the input yourself, the whole band was recording what they wanted to, you didn't have some guy in an office telling you how to write the structure of a song and how to look. So why did you break up? What was it that kind of triggered that?
Well, we never really broke up as such. I mean, don't get me wrong, we had our sort of periods of, mutual sulking and, whinging at each other. But actually, looking back overall, I think we got on remarkably well as bands go. We were nice to each other, I think, in a way that probably a lot of bands aren't. And as I say, there was a kind of there was a connection that was kind of under the surface. It's like it's hard to really put into words, but I think we all kind of felt it most when we were writing in rehearsals or certainly doing shows. So we never split up in that sense, but I think there comes a point where you're kind of doing the circuit over and over again, and touring relentlessly. And this is probably one of the things that I would, have done differently. You're sort of conditioned to think that, if you want to be in a band, certainly a kind of active or professional band, then you go through this kind of continual cycle where you sort of write, record, and then tour incessantly, and then write, record, and tour incessantly. And I think actually, particularly nowadays, that there's something a bit contrived about that. I think, that you don't need to tour all the time. In some ways you kind of preserve something, and you preserve something more by giving less in that sense. And I think we've sort of got to a point. Also, I was having kind of quite bad health issues. I got a brain hemorrhage on stage, and we were getting to the point where touring was just, I think, kind of mentally and physically wearing us down, and it was no longer becoming just fun. And you get to the point in your life. I mean, I think I'm sure it would be completely different if we were, playing to theatre or arena crowds and touring in the lap of luxury. But I think, we weren't slumming it in the way that a lot of bands were, but still that kind of endless drudgery of sort of being on the road in a van. And I think we got to a point where actually we did want to do other things with our lives, and we all kind of went off and did those other things, and had families and everything else. And but I say we never split up. We came back after a few years and did some shows with 100 Reasons in 2012, and we just done this tour now. And actually, it feels like the less that we do, the better it is. So we've kind of seem to have hit quite a good formula. It
was awesome seeing you guys on this tour. When you announced it, 15 years since the Neon Handshake, I thought, wow, like these, because I saw you guys support 100 Reasons, and it was like you'd never been away. You all came on stage and just absolutely nailed the set, and you all had the energy you had, many years ago. But the most recent tour, it was like the songs, I don't know, it felt just so completely fresh again. It wasn't like, you get these bands that just keep touring the same album, trying to cash in. It was more of just, you're here just to enjoy and celebrate the album. But you seemed, as a frontman, so up for it. I thought, it sounds weird, but you've become a lecturer, you've become an author, you're 15 years older now, but you're still jumping around on the drum kit, you're still throwing yourself in the crowd, you look like it's your first ever gig. So, I mean, that must have been pretty awesome to go on stage and also see these big sellout crowds after so many years. It must have been... I bet when you announced the tour, you thought, fuck, are we announcing 2 big venues here? Is this a bit ridiculous, or is this going to work?
Yeah, definitely. I think there was, initially, we were kind of surprised that, our booking agent, we thought we were kind of overshooting, really. But, yeah, amazed at how many people turned out. And, yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, I think that... I suppose we're kind of lucky to be in sort of reasonably good health and be able to kind of still perform with that same level of intensity. But I honestly think that we could have pulled it off. Just performing those songs without necessarily any of the kind of frenzied stage antics that we were, kind of known for back in the day. I think we could have pulled it off just by, being true to those songs. And I think, I wasn't planning, honestly, on, doing, crowd surfing and all the rest of it. I just thought, that's like, I'm sure that I've kind of grown out of that by now. But, when you're on stage, to me, the best thing about performing is that it's not something that's in your control at all. So I'm not like consciously at all ever saying to myself, what should I be doing now? And if I was, I think it would kill the show instantly. It would just totally, the whole excitement of performing and the whole energy of their shows comes from the fact that literally anything can happen at any time, and you're just getting carried away. If you're not getting carried away, then, and it doesn't have to be jumping into the crowd, but if you're not carried away by what it is you're doing on stage, I think people get bored very, very quickly. I'm just glad and I'm grateful, I'm humbled, actually, to be in a band where I could not only still have that experience, but have it probably in a way, an intensity that I've never had before. That was really the most surprising thing about these shows. It wasn't just like the old days. It just felt better. It felt it just felt like more of a show and more of a. It's almost like the songs are kind of so buried in our bones now that we didn't have to try.
Yeah.
And that was the best thing about it for me. I'm absolutely chuffed about that.
Now that this tour's finished, and obviously you're selling out London, Nottingham, Birmingham, all these different venues, have you kind of got a taste for going back on the road, or is it going to be like the 50th anniversary of Neon Handshake in 35 years' time that we see you again?
Well, I think we're doing a couple of festivals in summer, and I think probably we've kind of done our fill of the Neon Handshake Reflections tour.
Yeah.
I think that if we were to kind of be in any way active again, it would, we would have to kind of have a new record to offer. And, we are writing, we've got some ideas, but it's always tricky, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you don't want to be this kind of nostalgia band that ends up kind of flogging something to death. And on the other hand, you don't want to just write something and record something new for the sake of it because you still want to be in a band. So all I can say is that if the songs are there and if it feels, as raw and as intense as it's ever felt, then we will make another record. It's probably not going to be another record like the Neon Handshake or anything else that we've ever done, because if it was, it wouldn't be, again, it just wouldn't be genuine, because we are all, 15 years older and, have different lives. But I think that, I still absolutely think that we've got a lot to say through songwriting. And I think that there's a good chance that we will come up with something new that is not just for the sake of it, because we'd rather just leave it as it is. We'd rather just let it rest than make it contrived in any way. At the moment, I'm sort of, with some of the ideas that are circulating, I'm feeling fairly confident that we will pull something off.
Do you think all the other band members are on the same page? Because obviously you've got to consider all of the other four, and are they kind of all feeling that they want to carry on where you left off, or are they kind of enjoying the fact that you went to rehearse and then some music started to come out, or are they all like, come on Justin, we need to just do this album, this is all we want to do now?
No one's doing that. I think, everyone's kind of conscious that whatever we do has to be better than what we've just done.
Yeah.
So it has to look better, it has to sound better. We have to just be sharper than we've just been. And, so if anything, the kind of resistance will be, well, look, we've just done the best tour of our lives. Are we 100% confident that we can build on that in a way that is just not going to be, that is going to be just, as I say, better and sharper and just, but weirdly, as I say, we've got these ideas that kind of feel like there is potential. I think everyone is on the same page. I think, we're also on the page of, like, well, because we're not necessarily dependent on this for our livelihoods, we can, there's a certain kind of freedom that comes along with that, and we're not in a massive rush to get anywhere or to be anything. We're not trying to get in the charts or amass new followers or whatever it is that kind of bands just starting out tend to chase after. We're lucky to have an audience and a platform, and as I say, if we can do something that we think is better than anything we've done before, then we'll do it.
It sounds exciting. It's kind of, you're juicing up those listeners now that are kind of wanting new material, but at the same time there's nothing in concrete, there's no dates or any. Is it just literally demos at the moment between the band?
Yeah, pretty much. And as I say, it may come to nothing, but I think probably if we put another record out, it probably will be, if we do another record, we'll probably kind of do it this year and maybe put something out next year. But yeah, we'll see. It's just, as I say, we're kind of, it feels like we're not in the driving seat. We're sort of just passengers.
Yeah.
And it will determine itself if we get together and as I say, it's like this is a no-brainer, then we will put it out. But we won't do anything that in any way tarnishes the name that we've built up. That kind of the association between our band name and some kind of quality and purity or honesty. Like, we'll never do anything to taint that. And if that means that we do nothing, we'd rather do nothing. But I think we may end up doing something.
Now that you're obviously a father, you're an author, you're a lecturer, is it a bit weird that your students might have the opportunity to go and see you throw yourself around on stage singing rock songs now, or is it kind of, there's quite a contrast of the guy that wears a shirt and tie to lecturer then goes and rocks the night out with his band? It's a very different life for you now.
I'm more likely to wear a shirt and tie on stage than I am giving a lecture. But I think, it is a bit of a double life. But in some senses, they feel quite complementary. Teaching is a form of self-expression, and writing is a form of self-expression in any form, really. A lot of my teaching and my writing, through university is more about advocacy and activism than it is about, the art of the performance or being creative for the sake of being creative. But I'm sort of quite increasingly seeing, I'm feeling like that those boundaries are being blurred. I think the best sessions that I teach are ones that, it almost, emotional is probably too strong a word, but, they're not just about this kind of didactic style of standing in front of a classroom and giving people facts. There is more to it than that. It's more about a kind of communication of ideas that I think is not a million miles apart from, what we do on stage. In some senses, most of my research is concerned with really kind of deep problems of power that underline the cultural industries, the cultural and creative industries, in which my band, certainly in our early days, we were immersed in, much less so now. But it is sort of quite a natural opportunity, if you like, to kind of think critically about, the world around being in a band and around being on stage or being in front of a mic or being on camera or whatever it is. In some ways it is seamless, although I do understand why some people think it is a bit of a double life.
Obviously the future's looking good. Hopefully, if all goes to plan, we're going to get a new Headers for Heroes album, which is something I never thought would happen sort of 10 years ago. If you'd told me that, I'd have just gone, nah, it's never going to happen. You're in a good place yourself. You've got a good career. You've got a family now. It all seems very positive. Is there anything kind of advice-wise you'd give to the listeners that are... I mean, you've touched on it a bit about these bands that go chasing, the big dream, and now it seems very much you go and be in a band to get the most likes on Instagram or the most downloads. What's your advice for those bands that are trying to make a name for themselves right now? Because it's a lot tougher. It's all about streaming. Bands are having to tour a lot more. It's not just about record sales anymore. It's a tough industry to kind of break, isn't it?
Yeah, but just play from the fucking heart, as Bill Hicks said. I mean, it is just, I think that's just the most fundamental, first and foremost. Whatever else that you do in the way that you try to promote yourself or find new audiences, and whether you sign to a record label or, some artist consultancy bullshit that seems to be the fad nowadays, or get your songs up on Bandcamp, or, do some kind of crowdfunding or, social media, that's just all secondary. That's all fine. It doesn't matter which way, that's a different thing. But if it becomes primary, if it becomes the thing that, is driving you, then I think you're just falling into that classic show business trap of, what you really are seduced by is, the glitz and the glamour or the pull of some kind of, ideal of, represented by fame and money and that kind of elite clique that surrounds celebrities and celebrity culture, and the way in which celebrity culture is deified in our society. I think it's just it's a classic trap, and I think whatever happens to dead end, it just doesn't. It will never be fulfilling, whether you are successful, in that conventional sense of selling records, lots of records or not, or selling lots of tickets to shows or not. It will never fulfill you, will never satisfy you. I think that's just pretty obvious now, and I think most people are increasingly wised up to it. Although still you go to places like LA and you can't help thinking that, there is just this underlying desperation that everyone lives with, a desperation, either to make it, in inverted commas, or if you've made it, to kind of hold on to it. It's not just in music, it's in, the film industry, it's in, I think all the entertainment industries, but I think, it is a trap. It is a trap. And, I consider myself lucky enough in some ways to have had a taste of it and to almost fallen into the trap, and in some ways did fall in the trap where, there was definitely a time where I got caught up in some misguided sense of my own self-importance. But I mean, you just realise it is just a bubble. You're just chasing your own tail most of the time, and it doesn't lead anywhere, whatever happens. So, yeah, just play from the heart.
I opened a can of worms then, didn't I, with that question?
Yeah, well,
it's a good advice.
I've got plenty of worms.
Yeah. I think you were lucky. I think you kind of did see that big some record deal. You signed it, but you learnt the hard way, and you realised it wasn't all it was meant to be. And you've still come out stronger because you've gone independent. You've launched your own label. You've put your record out how you want it to sound. You've even got your own band members producing it, and that's probably what you'll do on the next album. I think if anyone's been there and done it and got the T-shirt, it is you. It really is.
Well, of sorts. As I say, we definitely weren't as a successful band that I think people seem to think, looking back on it. I think, in some ways, we were a bit of a flop in music industry terms. But we had fun.
I want to thank you for your time, Justin. I'm going to stop recording there because I think it's a nice way to end. So there it is. There's my interview with me and Justin Schlosberg. Like I said at the start of today's interview, one of my favourite bands of all time. Really, really great interview, and I think Justin's a fascinating guy. I love the fact that he's still got this hunger and this taste to want to be the frontman as Hell is for Heroes, and also teasing us and saying that they'd like to release new material is just, well, it excites me in a huge, huge way. If today is an introduction to you to Hell is for Heroes, and before you listen to this podcast you've never actually checked out any of their albums, I urge you to go out there and check them out. Neon Handshake, in my opinion, is one of the best debut albums of all time. Go and listen to it because it's phenomenal. Transmit Disrupt, which is the follow-up, is a great, great album with some awesome, awesome songs. And their self-titled third album is phenomenal as well. Just go and listen to everything. It's all on Spotify, it's on iTunes, it's on Amazon, it's in HMV. Wherever you can find good music, they will have these albums. You will not regret it. As always, everyone, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen today. It's been a great, great interview, and I'm really, really excited about what I've got coming up for you guys. We're going to take a break from music in the next episode. We're going to go back to TV and film, and I've got quite a big, big name. I'm really excited to share it all, but as always, you know me by now. I'm not going to bloody tell you. You're going to have to sit and wait. You have to go on markandme.com and follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You know the score by now. Get on there and I'll start dropping some hints in the next week or two. In the meantime, please support me. Mark and Me can't happen without the Patreon money. It costs a lot of money to put these on the server. As you saw recently, only this week, we had The Guardian put us out there as the podcast of the week, which was huge. It got us to number 14 in the podcast chart on iTunes, and that's in the whole world, so it's huge. But that means it needs a bigger server space to cope with the amount of people that want to download the episodes. So it's really important that you jump on the Patreon, even if you just give me 50p a month. It all helps. It means I can travel the country, conduct more interviews. I want to invest in some more gear because I love the sound quality, but I want to improve it. I want to get out there and record some better interviews face to face with these people, and I can do that with the Patreon money that comes through from the support of you guys and all the listeners out there. If you haven't done that yet, you can go on markandme.com and there's links there to my Patreon site. There's also links on there to the Spotify page, to the Instagram, the Facebook, and you've probably noticed on Twitter, I've been promoting lots and lots of great prizes for everyone that gets involved on Patreon as a kind of a thank you for the support. As I said, it's only 2 weeks now until my next episode, and it's a huge, huge guest. I'm so excited, and it was another face-to-face interview, so I always prefer them, and the sound quality's better, and you can kind of get a much more honest interview. So until then, hope you all have a great couple of weeks, and I'll speak to you all again soon.
Senor, can you tell me where we're heading? Lincoln County Road or Armageddon? Seem like I've been down this way before. Is there any truth in that, senor? Senor, senor, do you know where she's hiding? How long are we gonna be riding? How long must I keep my eyes glued to the door? Will there be any comfort there, senor? There's a wicked wind still blowing on that upper deck. There's an iron cross still hanging down from around our neck. There's a marching band still playing in that vacant lot where she held me in her arms one time and said, forget me not, senor. Senor, I can see that painted wagon, smell a tail of the dragon. Can't stand the suspense anymore. Can you tell me who to contact here, senor? That train load of fools bogged down in a magnetic field. A gypsy with a broken leg and a flashing ring. He says, son, this ain't a dream no more, it's the real thing. Senor, senor, you know their hearts here is hard as leather. Well, give me a minute, let me get it together. Just gotta pick myself up off the floor. I'm ready when you are, senor. Let's overturn these tables, disconnect these cables. This place don't make sense to me no more. Can you tell me what we're waiting for, senor?